The morning sun shone bright over the Galactic Military Academy as 5 cadets prepared for what should have been a simple training mission. Each cadet wore the silver uniform that marked them as the best students in their class. Each one came from a different planet, and each one had skills that made other students jealous. Hyan-Woo stood quietly at the back of the group, checking his basic equipment one more time. He was human, which meant he was considered the weakest member of the team. The other cadets barely looked at him as they talked about their advanced abilities. Humans were new to the galaxy, and most aliens thought they were too simple to be real. Soldiers. Jin sparkled in the sunlight as her crystalline body caught the light. She was from Altair Prime, where people were born with bodies made of living crystal. Her skin could connect directly to any computer or machine. She could talk to spaceships and make broken engines work again just by touching them. The other cadets always asked her to fix their equipment, because she was faster than any repair robot. Daeho was twice as tall as everyone else and had 4 massive arms instead of 2. His people from the planet Korva were born warriors. Their skin was naturally thick like armor, and they could lift heavy objects that would crush other beings. Daeho had never lost a fight in his life. Other students were afraid to even practice combat with him because he was so strong. So Young looked normal on the outside, but her mind was special. She came from Zephyr, where people could read thoughts and speak without words. She could process thousands of pieces of information at the same time. During written tests, she would finish in minutes while others needed hours. Her telepathic abilities made her the perfect scout and strategist. Wu Jin was the most interesting of all. He was a metamorph from the planet Flux. His body could change into any shape he wanted. He could grow wings to fly or gills to swim underwater. He could make his skin hard like rock or soft like water. The academy instructors said he was the most adaptable student they had ever seen. The mission briefing was simple. They would be dropped onto planet Kepler 442B for a navigation exercise. The planet had forests and rivers, but no dangerous animals. They had to find 3 marked waypoints and reach the extraction zone within 2 days. Emergency supplies were hidden at each waypoint. If something went wrong, they had communication devices and an emergency beacon. The transport ship pilot was a friendly Korvan who joked with the cadets as they flew toward the planet. He told them this was the easiest training mission in the academy. Students called it a vacation because it was so simple. Even the weakest cadets had never failed this exercise. As they approached the planet, Hyun-Woo looked out the window at the green forest below. Something felt wrong, but he could not explain what. The other cadets were laughing and making bets about who would reach the first waypoint fastest. They acted like this was a game instead of a military exercise. The landing pod was designed to automatically navigate to the correct drop zone. Jin connected her crystalline fingers to the navigation system to monitor their descent. Everything looked normal on the screens. The pod was following the planned route and would land exactly where it was supposed to. Then the navigation system started making strange noises. Jinna frowned as her connection to the computers became fuzzy. The screens flickered and showed confusing numbers. The pod began to shake and spin as it fell through the atmosphere. The pilot tried to take manual control, but the steering was not responding. Daeho used his 4 arms to grab onto the safety rails and shouted for everyone to hold on tight. So Young tried to use her telepathic abilities to sense what was happening, but she felt a strange buzzing in her mind. Woojin started shifting between different forms as his body automatically tried to find a shape that could survive a crash. The pod hit the treetops hard and bounced between massive tree trunks. Metal scraped against bark as they crashed through branches. The impact threw everyone around inside the pod like toys in a shaken box. Emergency lights flashed red as alarms screamed warnings about hull damage and system failures. When the pod finally stopped moving, everyone was bruised and shaken. The door would not open automatically, so Daeho had to force it with his warrior strength. They stumbled out into a thick jungle that looked nothing like the planned drop zone. Instead of an open field with marked paths, they were surrounded by massive trees and thick vines. Their equipment was scattered everywhere. Communication devices were broken and sparking. Food supplies had spilled out of torn containers. The emergency beacon was cracked and making weak beeping sounds. Jinna tried to connect to the remaining electronics, but her crystal body interfaces were damaged from the crash. The jungle was hot and humid. Strange insects buzzed around them, and unfamiliar bird sounds came from high in the trees. This was not the safe training area they had studied. The maps they had memorized were useless here. None of them recognized any landmarks or knew which direction led to safety. Daeho noticed cracks in his natural armor that had never been there before. The impact had damaged his supposedly indestructible body. So Young held her head in her hands as telepathic static filled her mind. She could not read anyone's thoughts or sense their emotions. Wu Jin kept shifting between forms, without meaning to, as his body reacted to the stress. An unfamiliar environment. The carefully planned team structure fell apart immediately. Each cadet had been trained to be the best in their specialty, but now their specialties were not working. They began to argue about what to do next. Jinna insisted they should try to repair the communication equipment first. Daeho wanted to scout the area for threats. So Young suggested they should analyze their situation logically before making any decisions. The argument got louder as each cadet insisted their approach was best. They had been taught that their species were naturally superior to others in different ways. Now they were trying to prove who should be the leader by talking about their advanced abilities and complex training, while his teammates debated advanced survival theories and argued about proper chain of command. Hyunwoo walked away from the group. He looked up at the massive trees surrounding them and chose the tallest one he could see. Without saying anything to the others, he started climbing. The other cadets were too busy arguing to notice what the human was doing. They were focused on their broken equipment and damaged abilities. None of them thought to look up at the simple solution that was right above their heads. Hyunwoo climbed steadily upward using the basic skills he had learned as a child on Earth. He did not need advanced technology or special abilities. He just needed strong hands and the willingness to go higher than anyone else was thinking to look. Hyunwoo climbed higher and higher into the massive tree while his teammates continued their heated argument below. The bark was rough against his hands, but he kept going up branch by branch. Earth had taught humans to climb trees when they were children, and now this simple skill was about to save 5 lives. The other cadets were still debating which direction to go and who should be in charge. Jinna was trying to explain probability calculations about finding the correct path. Daeho was flexing his forearms and talking about warrior instincts. So Young was holding her head as she tried to force her telepathic abilities to work through the strange interference. Wu Jin kept shifting between different forms, as stress made his shape-changing abilities go wild. First he looked like a bird, then like a jungle cat, then back to his normal form. His body could not decide what shape would help them survive, and the constant changing was making him dizzy and tired. From high up in the tree, Hyunwoo could see things that none of his advanced teammates had thought to look for. The jungle stretched out in all directions, but it was not just endless green wilderness. There were signs of life and civilization, if you knew how to spot them. 3 thin columns of smoke rose from different locations in the forest. Smoke meant fire, and fire meant intelligent beings who could help them or at least point them toward safety. The closest smoke column was about 5 kilometers to the north, where the jungle seemed to thin out into grasslands. To the east, Hyunwoo could see sunlight reflecting off water. A river cut through the forest in a winding path that led toward lower ground. Rivers were natural highways that people followed, and rescue teams would search along water sources first. The river was only 2 kilometers away and looked easy to reach. Most importantly, the human could see scattered pieces of their equipment glinting in the sunlight below. Their gear had been thrown in all directions during the crash, but it had not disappeared. A communication device was stuck in a tree about 100 meters to the south. Food containers were scattered in a line leading toward the river. The emergency beacon was lying near a fallen log where they could easily retrieve it. Hyunwoo memorized the locations of everything he could see, then climbed back down to rejoin his team. The other cadets were still arguing about complex survival strategies and mathematical approaches to navigation. They barely noticed when he returned from his tree-climbing expedition. The human waited patiently for a pause in their argument, then spoke up in a calm voice. He pointed north toward the smoke columns and explained what they probably meant. He gestured east toward the river and described why following water was a good strategy. Then he began listing the locations of their scattered equipment that he had spotted from above. The other cadets stopped arguing and stared at him in confusion. So Young tried to use her telepathic abilities to scan the areas he described, but her mind was still filled with static interference. Jinna attempted to activate her remaining sensors to confirm what he was saying, but her crystal interfaces only showed meaningless data. Daeho squinted in the directions Hanwoo had pointed, but his warrior training had never included anything as basic as climbing trees to look around. His people fought enemies they could see and overcome with strength. The idea of gathering information from high places was completely foreign to him. Wu Jin tried to shift into a form with better eyesight, but his shape-shifting was still unstable. Every time he started to change into something useful, his body would snap back to his normal form or shift into something completely different. The stress was making his natural abilities work against him. The advanced aliens found it hard to believe that their primitive human teammate had learned more about their situation in 20 minutes than they had discovered through an hour of sophisticated analysis. Their technology was superior and their abilities were more advanced, so how could simple tree climbing be more effective than their methods? But none of them had a better plan to offer. Their equipment was mostly broken and their special abilities were not working properly. The jungle around them looked the same in every direction, and they had no way to navigate without functioning technology. They were used to having computers and sensors tell them where to go. Jin was the first to admit that Hanwoo had found solutions they had missed. Her crystalline body was designed to interface with advanced systems, but those systems were damaged beyond her ability to repair. Basic observation skills were not part of her education on Altair Prime. Daeho felt frustrated that his massive strength was useless for gathering information. He could break through obstacles and fight enemies, but he could not punch his way to safety. The warrior culture of Korva emphasized direct action and overwhelming force, not careful observation and planning. So Young realized that her telepathic abilities had made her lazy about using her normal senses. She had always been able to read minds and emotions to understand situations. Now that her telepathy was blocked, she felt blind and helpless in a way she had never experienced before. Wu Jing understood that his shape-shifting powers were meant to help him adapt to new environments, but the stress was making him change forms randomly instead of choosing useful shapes. His body was reacting to fear instead of responding to his conscious control. Reluctantly, the team agreed to follow Hanwoo's suggestions about retrieving their equipment and heading toward the river. They still believed that once they reached civilization, proper leadership would return to one of the more advanced species. Humans were useful for simple tasks, but real decision-making required superior intelligence and abilities. As they began moving through the jungle following the human directions, the other cadets kept expecting their natural advantages to reassert themselves. Jian thought her crystal interfaces would start working again once they found better equipment. Daeho assumed his warrior instincts would kick in when they faced real danger. So Young hoped her telepathic abilities would clear up. Once they got away from whatever was causing the interference, Wu Jin believed his shape-shifting would stabilize once he adapted to the planet environment. None of them realized that they were about to learn something important about the difference between having advanced abilities and knowing how to use them effectively. The human walked calmly ahead of them, using basic skills that any child from Earth would recognize. He watched the ground for safe footing and looked up regularly to check their direction. He listened to the sounds of the jungle and paid attention to changes in the wind and light. These simple survival techniques had kept humans alive on a dangerous planet for thousands of years. Now they were about to prove more valuable than all the advanced technology and special abilities in the galaxy. As the team moved through the dense jungle following, Hanwoo wrote the other cadets began to notice something strange about how their human teammate approached problems. Every obstacle they encountered seemed to have a simple solution that none of them had thought of. The first real test came when they reached the river that Hanwoo had spotted from his tree-climbing reconnaissance. The water was flowing fast, and the river was much wider than it had looked from above. The current was strong enough to sweep away anyone who tried to swim across, and the water was too deep to wade through safely. Jin immediately began running calculations in her head about the mathematical probability of successfully jumping from one bank to the other. She measured the distance with her eyes and estimated the force needed to clear the water. Her crystalline body was lighter than normal flesh, so she thought she might be able to make the leap. Daeho prepared to use his warrior strength to vault across the river in one mighty bound. His forearms gave him extra power for jumping, and his thick skin could handle a rough landing on the other side. He had cleared similar distances during combat training on Kova. So Young tried to use her telepathic abilities to scan the river bottom for safe crossing points or hidden dangers. The interference was still scrambling her mental powers, but she hoped to at least sense if there were any creatures living in the water that might attack them. Wu Jin attempted to shift into an aquatic form that could swim safely across the strong current. His shape-shifting abilities were still unstable, but he thought he might be able to force his body into a fish-like shape long enough to reach the other side, while his teammates prepared to overcome the river obstacle with their various advanced abilities. Hanwoo simply walked along the bank looking for something. The others watched him with confusion as he ignored their complex plans and focused on examining the shoreline. After walking for about 10 minutes upstream, Hanwoo stopped and pointed at a massive tree that had fallen across the river during some past storm. The trunk was thick enough to walk on, and it reached from one bank to the other, creating a perfect natural bridge. The other cadets stared at the fallen log in amazement. They had been so focused on using their special abilities to jump over or swim through the river that none of them had thought to look for a way around the problem. The human had found a solution that required no advanced skills or dangerous risks. This pattern repeated itself throughout their journey as they searched for their scattered equipment. When they found a communication device stuck high up in a tree, the aliens immediately began discussing complex retrieval strategies. Jinna talked about extending her crystalline body to reach the device. Daeho suggested using his jumping ability to grab it. Hanwoo looked around the base of the tree until he found a long, straight branch that had fallen nearby. He used the stick to knock the communication device out of the tree and catch it safely. The solution was so simple that the others felt embarrassed for not thinking of it first. When they discovered food containers scattered in a thorn bush that was too thick to push through, the team prepared to use their abilities to fight their way to the supplies. Daeho wanted to tear through the thorns with his forearms. Wu Jin planned to shift into a form with thick skin that could resist the sharp points. The human found a different approach. He walked around the thorn bush until he discovered a gap where animals had created a natural path to reach water. The passage led right to where their food was trapped, and they could retrieve it without getting scratched by a single thorn. Each simple solution made the other cadets question their own way of thinking about problems. They had been trained to use their advanced capabilities to overcome every challenge they faced. Their education had focused on maximizing their natural advantages and superior abilities. Hanwoo seemed to solve problems by thinking about them from completely different angles. Instead of trying to overpower obstacles, he looked for ways to avoid them entirely. Instead of using superior strength or technology, he used observation and creativity to find easier paths. The human approach was starting to make sense to his teammates, but it was also confusing. They had always been taught that having better abilities meant you were more likely to survive and succeed. Now they were seeing that sometimes the best solution was the one that required the least effort. When they encountered a group of small but aggressive native creatures that blocked their path. The team's first instinct was to fight or flee using their various powers. Daeho prepared for battle while Jinna tried to scan the creatures with her damaged sensors. So Young attempted to telepathically communicate with the animals. Hyun-Woo picked up several pieces of their scattered metal equipment and began banging them together to create loud clanging noises. The creatures were startled by the unfamiliar sounds and scattered into the undergrowth. To escape the strange noise, the human had realized that the small animals were more afraid of them than they were dangerous. Instead of engaging in unnecessary combat, he had used their natural fear response to solve the problem peacefully. No one was hurt, and they could continue their journey without wasting time or energy. By the end of their first day traveling together, the other cadets were beginning to understand that Hyun-Woo was not just getting lucky with simple solutions. He was thinking about challenges in ways that their advanced educations had never taught them to consider. Their species had developed superior abilities to overcome obstacles through force or technology. Humans had apparently learned to find ways around obstacles that did not require superior abilities at all. This was a completely different approach to problem-solving. Jin-Dasha realized that her crystalline body interfaces were designed to solve technological problems, but many survival situations did not require technology at all. Daeho understood that his warrior training focused on defeating enemies, but most challenges were not actually enemies to be fought. So Young discovered that her telepathic abilities were meant to process complex information quickly, but sometimes simple observation was more useful than complex analysis. Woojin learned that his shapeshifting was supposed to help him adapt to new environments, but adaptation meant understanding the environment, not just changing to match it. The human way of thinking was starting to influence how they all approached problems. Instead of immediately trying to use their special abilities, they began to look for simpler solutions first. Instead of assuming they needed to overcome obstacles, they started looking for ways around them. This new perspective was changing more than just their survival strategy. It was changing how they thought about leadership and teamwork. They were beginning to realize that the best leader might not be the one with the most advanced abilities, but the one who could help everyone use their abilities more effectively. By the second day of their survival journey, the team dynamics had changed completely. What had started as reluctant acceptance of Hyun-Woo guidance had grown into genuine respect for his problem-solving abilities. The human had successfully led them to recover most of their scattered equipment and had found safe shelter for the night. More importantly, Hyun-Woo had begun to understand how to work with each teammate damaged or limited abilities instead of focusing on what they could not do. This was a type of leadership that none of them had experienced before in their military training. Jin-Dash was still frustrated that her crystalline body interfaces were not working properly. The crash had damaged her ability to connect directly with electronic devices, and she felt useless without her technological advantages. She kept trying to force her crystal skin to interface with their broken equipment, but it only caused her pain. Hyun-Woo sat down next to her and watched her attempts to repair a communication device. Instead of telling her to stop trying, he asked her to explain how the device was supposed to work. As she described the internal circuits and power systems, he began to understand what was wrong. The human showed Jinna how to use basic tools and manual techniques to repair the device without needing her crystal interfaces. He had learned basic electronics during his education on Earth and could teach her to work with her hands, instead of relying on her special abilities. Jinna was amazed to discover that she could actually fix things better when she used both her crystal abilities and manual skills together. Her advanced education had focused so much on her natural advantages that she had never learned these basic techniques that most humans took for granted. Daeho was struggling with his cracked armor, which made him feel vulnerable for the first time in his life. The warrior culture of Korva taught that strength and durability were the most important qualities for survival. Now his natural protection was damaged and he felt weak and scared. Hyun-Woo observed how the massive warrior moved through the jungle and noticed that he was trying to force his way through obstacles instead of going around them. The human began to teach Daeho how to use the forest environment as additional protection instead of relying only on his damaged armor. The warrior learned to move quietly through thick vegetation and use tree trunks as cover from potential threats. These stealth techniques were not part of traditional Corven training, but they were perfect for someone whose natural armor could no longer protect him from every danger. Daeho discovered that being vulnerable had forced him to become more aware of his surroundings and more creative in his movement. His forearms were actually better suited for silent climbing and careful navigation than he had ever realized. His weakness had become a new type of strength. So young, telepathic scrambling had initially seemed like a complete disaster for someone whose abilities were based on reading minds and processing mental information. She felt blind and helpless without her natural advantages and could not understand how to function without telepathy. Hyun-woo pointed out that her inability to read minds was actually forcing her to observe body language and environmental cues more carefully than ever before. She was learning to notice things about people and situations that her telepathic abilities had always made unnecessary. The human taught her to pay attention to voice, tones, and facial expressions and physical posture. These observation skills were helping her understand her teammates better than mind reading ever had. She was learning who they really were instead of just accessing their surface thoughts. So young, began to realize that her telepathic abilities had made her lazy about really understanding other people. Now she was developing genuine empathy and communication, skills that were much more valuable than just scanning thoughts and emotions. Woojin. Shape-shifting was still unstable and unpredictable, but Hyun-woo suggested that instead of fighting the instability, he should learn to work with it. The human had noticed that his body was actually trying to adapt to environmental changes automatically. When the air pressure dropped before rain, Woojin's skin became more sensitive to moisture. When they moved through areas with dangerous plants, his body naturally developed thicker skin for protection. His uncontrolled shifting was actually an early warning system for environmental hazards. The human taught him to pay attention to what his body was trying to tell him instead of forcing it to maintain specific shapes. Woojin became their scout for detecting changes in weather and identifying potential dangers before anyone else noticed them. His shape-shifting abilities became more stable when he stopped trying to control them completely and started working with his natural adaptation responses. He learned to guide his changes instead of forcing them and became more effective than he had ever been before. The most remarkable thing about Hyun-woo leadership was not his ability to solve problems, but his talent for helping others solve problems in new ways. He did not try to be the smartest or strongest member of the team, and he did not compete with their natural abilities. Instead, the human created situations where everyone could contribute their unique skills in ways they had never considered before. He helped them discover that their perceived weaknesses could actually become strengths when approached from different angles. Jin-ah learned that combining her crystal abilities with manual skills made her a better engineer than either approach alone. Daeho discovered that vulnerability had taught him stealth and awareness that made him a more complete warrior. So Young found that observation skills gave her deeper understanding than telepathy ever could. Woojin realized that working with his natural adaptation responses instead of fighting them made his shape-shifting more effective and useful. Each team member was becoming better at their specialties by learning to think about them differently. The other cadets began to understand that human leadership was not about being superior to everyone else, but about bringing out the best in everyone around them. Hyun-woo did not try to replace their abilities with his own, but help them use their abilities more effectively. This was completely different from the leadership styles they had been taught in their military education. Most species focused on hierarchy and dominance where the strongest or smartest individual made decisions for everyone else. Human leadership seemed to be based on cooperation and mutual support. The team was functioning more smoothly than they ever had during their training exercises back at the academy. They were learning to trust each other and work together in ways that maximized everyone's strengths, while minimizing their weaknesses. As they prepared to face whatever challenges lay Ahead, the cadets realized that they had discovered something important about effective teamwork. The best teams were not made up of individuals trying to prove their superiority, but of people working together to achieve common goals. Hyun-woo had shown them that true leadership was not about having the most advanced abilities, but about understanding how to help others use their abilities to their fullest potential. This lesson was about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. Just as the team was beginning to function smoothly under Hyun-woo guidance, they faced their biggest challenge yet. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon and their repaired equipment was detecting a massive storm system approaching the jungle. The readings showed dangerous lightning activity, high winds and heavy rain that would make travel impossible. The storm was moving fast and would reach them within a few hours. Their emergency beacon was working again, but rescue teams would not be able to fly in dangerous weather. They were still at least a full day of travel from the extraction point that Hyun-woo had spotted during his tree climbing reconnaissance. The approaching storm meant they would have to find shelter and wait out the bad weather before they could continue their journey to safety. This was exactly the kind of crisis that separated good teams from great ones and tested whether their new leadership dynamic would hold under pressure. The other cadets immediately fell back into their species. Traditional crisis responses as fear and stress overwhelmed their recent lessons about working together. Each alien reverted to the survival strategies they had been taught since childhood. Instead of remembering the new approaches they had learned, Jin started running complex mathematical calculations about storm probability and wind speed and rainfall amounts. She was trying to use pure logic and data analysis to find the perfect solution to their weather problem. Her crystalline mind processed thousands of variables but could not find a clear answer. Daeho prepared for battle as if he could physically fight the storm itself. His warrior instincts told him to find the strongest defensive position and use his 4 arms to protect his teammates from the wind and rain. He wanted to face the danger head-on like his people had always done. So Young attempted to push her telepathic abilities past their interference limits to contact any rescue teams that might be in the area. She focused all her mental energy on trying to send distress signals through the static that had been blocking her powers since the crash. Woo Jin started shifting rapidly between different forms as his body tried to find a shape that could survive the incoming storm. He changed from a bird that could fly away to a burrowing creature that could hide underground to a water creature that could handle heavy rain. Each cadet was working alone using their individual abilities to try to solve the problem. The teamwork and cooperation they had developed over the past 2 days was falling apart under the stress of the approaching emergency. They were scared and desperate and falling back on old habits. Hyun-woo watched his teammates panic and realized that this was the real test of everything they had learned together. The storm was dangerous, but it was not their biggest threat. The real danger was that they would forget how to work as a team and try to survive as individuals. The human took a deep breath and called everyone together in a calm voice. He asked them to stop what they were doing and sit down in a circle. The other cadets wanted to keep working on their individual solutions, but something about his quiet confidence made them listen. Hyun-woo asked each team member to describe what they were most afraid of about the approaching storm. This simple question helped them realize that they were all scared of different things, and their fear was making them think only about their own survival instead of the group. Jinna was afraid that her mathematical calculations were not enough to find a perfect solution. Daeho was scared that his damaged armor would not protect him from the storm. So Young feared that her blocked telepathy meant she could not call for help. Woo-jin was terrified that his unstable shapeshifting would make him vulnerable when he needed his abilities most. Then the human asked them to think about what they would do if they were back home on their own planets facing similar dangerous weather. This question helped them remember that every species had traditional ways of dealing with storms that did not require advanced technology or perfect conditions. Jin remembered that her people on Altair Prime built crystal shelters that could withstand massive electrical storms. The shelters were not perfect, but they were good enough to keep everyone safe. She did not need a mathematical perfect solution, just a practical one that worked. Daeho recalled that. Korean warriors had survived countless battles in terrible weather by finding natural defensive positions and working together to protect each other. His damaged armor was not ideal, but it was still better than no protection at all. So Young thought about how her people on Zephyr had communicated during storms when telepathy was disrupted by atmospheric interference. They used simple signal systems and stayed close together so they could help each other without needing to read minds. Wu Jin remembered that metamorphs had survived on their changing planet by adapting to whatever conditions they faced, instead of trying to find the perfect form for every situation. His shapeshifting did not need to be perfect, it just needed to be useful. Working together, the team began to combine their individual knowledge and abilities to create a solution that none of them could have achieved alone. They were no longer trying to overcome the storm with superior technology or advanced abilities, but were looking for practical ways to wait it out safely. Jin-Ah used her remaining crystal abilities to scan for cave systems that her damaged sensors had initially dismissed as unsuitable. She found a network of connected caves that could provide shelter from wind and rain and lightning. Daeho used his warrior training and 4 arms to secure the cave entrance against flying debris and falling branches. His strength was perfect for moving rocks and logs to create barriers that would keep the storm outside. So Young used her forced reliance on observation skills to study air currents and notice that their chosen cave was well ventilated and would not trap dangerous gases. Her new awareness was helping her notice details that her telepathy had never detected. Wu Jin used his controlled shapeshifting to scout deeper into the cave system and make sure it was safe from internal dangers like unstable rocks or dangerous creatures. His adaptation abilities helped him navigate tight spaces and test the structural integrity of their shelter. Under Hyun-woo guidance, each team member was contributing their natural abilities to solve the problem, but they were working together instead of competing with each other. They were creating a solution that used everyone's strengths while covering for everyone's weaknesses. The storm was still approaching, and they had limited time to prepare their shelter, but they were no longer panicking or working at cross purposes. They had remembered how to function as a team and were ready to face whatever challenges the weather would bring. As the first drops of rain began to fall and thunder rumbled in the distance, the 5 cadets finished their preparations and settled into their cave shelter. They had survived their first real crisis as a united team and were about to discover that working together could help them overcome challenges that would have defeated them as individuals. The storm lasted for 18 long hours, but the team did not just survive in their cave shelter, they actually thrived. The enforced time together in a safe space gave them the opportunity to fully repair their emergency beacon, organize their remaining supplies, and plan their route to the extraction point. More importantly, the shared experience of weathering the storm together had transformed them from 5 individuals with different specialties into a truly integrated team. They had learned to trust each other completely and work together in ways that maximized everyone's abilities while minimizing their weaknesses. Jin-Ah used the time to teach the others basic electronics repair using the manual techniques that Hyun-woo had shown her. Her crystalline abilities combined with traditional tools allowed her to fix equipment that had seemed beyond repair. She discovered that teaching others made her own skills stronger. Daeho shared his warrior knowledge about reading weather patterns and predicting when it would be safe to travel. His damaged armor had taught him to be more cautious and observant, and these new skills made him a better protector for the team. So Young used her improved observation abilities to study each teammate and understand their individual strengths and concerns. Without telepathy, she had learned to really listen to what people were saying, and this made her a better communicator and strategist. Wu Jin had gained control over his shapeshifting by learning to work with his natural adaptation responses instead of fighting them. He became their early warning system for environmental changes and could detect subtle shifts in air pressure and temperature that indicated changing conditions. When the storm finally passed, the team emerged from their shelter refreshed and organized and ready to complete their journey to safety. They had used their time wisely and had become more capable than they had ever been during their training at the academy. The final day of travel to the extraction point was smooth and efficient. They encountered obstacles but handled them easily using the teamwork and problem-solving skills they had developed. Each challenge was met with calm discussion and creative solutions rather than panic and competition. When they reached the designated extraction zone, they were surprised to find that the rescue team had already arrived and was waiting for them. The storm had delayed rescue operations, but as soon as the weather cleared, the ships had been dispatched to find the missing cadets. The rescue team was amazed to find all 5 cadets not only alive and healthy, but working together more effectively than teams that had trained together for months. Most survival situations left cadets stressed and arguing about who was responsible for their problems. The rescue commander was a veteran corpsman officer with decades of experience in military operations. He had seen many training accidents and knew how they usually affected young cadets. He was impressed by the calm confidence and mutual respect that the 5 aliens displayed. The commander was particularly interested in how the team had managed to work together so effectively despite their different species and abilities. He asked Hyunwoo to explain the leadership techniques that had helped them survive and thrive in such difficult circumstances. The human response became legendary throughout the Galactic Military Academy and was studied by leadership instructors for years afterward. Hyunwoo explained that humans had spent thousands of years learning to survive on a dangerous planet. Without advanced technology or naturally superior abilities, Earth had taught humans to think creatively and work collaboratively and find simple solutions to complex problems. While other species had evolved to excel in specific areas, humans had evolved to adapt and help others adapt to changing circumstances. The human explained that their greatest strength was not what they could do alone, but what they could accomplish by bringing out the best in everyone around them. Human leadership was based on understanding that every individual had valuable abilities that could contribute to group success. The rescue commander was fascinated by this philosophy and asked for more details about human approaches to teamwork and problem-solving. He had never encountered a species that focused on helping others succeed rather than proving their own superiority. The story of the lost cadets spread throughout the galaxy, but it was not told as a tale of human superiority over other species. Instead, it became a lesson about the value of different perspectives and the importance of understanding that advancement is not always about having the most sophisticated tools or abilities. The Academy began incorporating human leadership principles into their training programs. Cadets learned that the most advanced solution is often the one that actually works, and that the best leaders are those who make everyone else better rather than trying to be the best themselves. Jinna became a renowned engineer who was known for combining advanced technology with practical manual skills. She taught other crystalline beings that their natural abilities were more effective when combined with traditional techniques. Daeho became a legendary warrior who was famous for his strategic thinking and protective instincts. He showed other Corvins that true strength came from wisdom and teamwork rather than just physical power. So Young became a diplomatic expert who specialized in cross-species communication and conflict resolution. She proved that understanding others was more valuable than just reading their thoughts. Woojin became an exploration specialist who could adapt to any environment and help others adapt as well. He demonstrated that shape-shifting was most effective when used to help the team rather than just for personal survival. Hyunwoo became an instructor at the academy where he taught leadership and survival skills to cadets from all species. His classes were the most popular in the school because students learned practical skills that helped them succeed in any situation. Years later, when each of the cadets had become successful officers in their own right, they still credited their human teammate with teaching them the most important lesson of their military careers. True leadership was not about being the strongest or smartest or most technologically advanced member of the team. Real leadership was about understanding that every problem had a solution and that the best solutions usually came from working together and thinking differently rather than trying to overpower obstacles with superior abilities alone. The 5 cadets remained friends throughout their careers and often worked together on important missions. They had learned that the most effective teams were built on mutual respect and cooperation rather than competition and hierarchy. Their success inspired a new generation of galactic leaders who understood that diversity of thought and approach was more valuable than uniformity of ability. The galaxy became a more collaborative and peaceful place because of the lessons learned by 5 lost cadets who discovered that sometimes the best way forward is to climb a tree and look around.